I'm 35, male, and work as a systems analyst. I've always been the type to meticulously plan, save, and ensure there's a safety net for the future. I grew up in a family where financial stability was prioritized, so when I married my wife 5 years ago, I thought we were on the same page. Clearly, I was wrong. It started on a Monday evening. I got home from work, exhausted as usual, and noticed my wife sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She looked uneasy. Normally, she'd greet me, but this time she barely acknowledged I was home. I asked if everything was okay, but she brushed it off, mumbling something about being tired. I didn't think much of it at first, but something felt off. I decided to log into our shared bank account to pay the utilities. That's when I noticed it. My heart stopped. The account balance was $347.92. This was the same account where we'd saved over $200,000, a combination of years of disciplined saving and a sizable inheritance I'd received from my grandfather. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a glitch. I refreshed the page. Same number. I checked the transaction history, and my stomach dropped. Over the past 2 weeks, there were several withdrawals and wire transfers. $50,000 here, $25,000 there, until the account was drained. I turned to my wife, who was still glued to the TV, and demanded, "What happened to our savings?" She flinched but didn't look at me. I donated it," she whispered. For a second, I thought I misheard her. "You did what?" She finally looked at me, her expression half defensive, half anxious. "I donated it to an organization helping people in need." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Without consulting me? All of it? To who? What organization? Her voice wavered, but she said, "It's a charity that helps orphans and builds schools overseas." They reached out to me through social media. They said our money could save lives, and I thought. I cut her off, my anger boiling over. "You thought? Without even discussing it? Did you even verify if it was legitimate?" She folded her arms defensively. "They show me photos and testimonials. It felt real. And why do you care so much about money? Shouldn't we be helping people instead of hoarding it?" I was speechless. This wasn't about being charitable. It was about trust, responsibility, and basic communication in a marriage. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just some act of blind altruism. There was something more to this. I excused myself, grabbed my laptop, and started digging. It didn't take long to figure out the organization she donated to was a well-known scam. A quick search brought up dozens of reports of people being duped by the same scheme. Fake promises, stolen funds, no real charity work. I returned to the living room, fuming. "Do you even realize what you've done? You gave our entire life savings to a scam." She stood up, her face red with anger. "How dare you call it a scam? You don't understand. You've always been so selfish with money, treating it like it's more important than people. I'm not going to apologize for doing something good." "Good?" I shouted. "You didn't save anyone. You got conned. And now we have nothing." The days that followed were a blur of arguments and tension. I couldn't sleep, eat, or focus at work. Every time I tried to discuss the gravity of the situation, she'd shut me down, doubling down on her belief that she did the right thing. But I wasn't going to let this slide. I reached out to my lawyer, who confirmed my worst fears. Since it was a shared account, she had legal access to the funds. Recovering the money would be an uphill battle unless I could prove she acted maliciously or was coerced into transferring the funds. But there was another option: filing for divorce and suing her for financial damages. It was a hard pill to swallow. I didn't marry her thinking it would end like this, but her entitlement and complete disregard for our partnership left me with no choice. I quietly started the paperwork. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator to look into the scam. I needed every shred of evidence to make my case. What he uncovered was worse than I imagined. The organization had sent my wife lavish gifts, designer bags, jewelry, and even a weekend spa retreat. They weren't just preying on her goodwill. They were grooming her with perks to keep her donating. She'd fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. When I confronted her with the evidence, she exploded. "How dare you spy on me? You're such a control freak. I was doing something good, and you're treating me like a criminal." "No, I replied, my voice cold. You are a criminal for destroying our future and enabling fraudsters. And now I'm done. Filing for divorce was only the beginning. I also filed a civil suit against her for financial damages. My lawyer argued that her actions constituted gross financial misconduct, and I demanded restitution of half the lost funds. It was messy, painful, and dragged on for months, but I was relentless. In the meantime, the private investigator continued to gather dirt on the scam organization. I passed everything to the FBI, who launched an investigation. Turns out, my wife wasn't the only victim. Dozens of people had been defrauded, and the leaders of the scheme were eventually arrested. Watching the news coverage of their arrests gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. As for the divorce proceedings, my wife tried every dirty trick in the book. She claimed I was abusive, a blatant lie, tried to freeze my personal accounts, and even attempted to guilt me by involving her family. Her mother called me, crying, begging me to forgive and forget. But I stood firm. In court, the evidence spoke for itself. My lawyer presented the financial records, the investigator's findings, and even her own emails with the scammers. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering her to repay a significant portion of the lost funds. She also lost any claim to the small property I inherited from my grandfather, which she'd initially tried to fight for. By the time it was over, she was left humiliated, broke, and with a tarnished reputation. I wasn't gloating, but I couldn't deny the sense of justice. She had to face the consequences of her entitlement and recklessness. Now, I'm in the process of rebuilding, emotionally, financially, and personally. Losing that money was devastating, but in a strange way, it was a wake-up call. It taught me the importance of protecting myself, even from those closest to me. The fallout from the divorce was both liberating and exhausting. Friends and colleagues who knew what happened were supportive, though there were whispers behind my back. Some people even asked why I didn't just forgive her. They didn't understand that it wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal, the entitlement, and the total lack of accountability. One of the more shocking twists came a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. My ex-wife had the audacity to show up at my office. I was in the middle of a meeting when a receptionist interrupted to tell me she was in the lobby, demanding to see me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to talk to her. Outside, where security cameras could see us. She looked disheveled, a shadow of the person she used to be. I need help, she said, her voice trembling. I'm being evicted, and I don't have anywhere to go. I stared at her, stunned by the sheer nerve. That's not my problem, I said flatly. You made your bed. Lie in it. But I have no one else to turn to, she cried, tears streaming down her face. You're the only one who understands what happened. Understand? I scoffed. You betrayed me. You gave our life savings to scammers and refused to take responsibility. And now you want me to help you? No, absolutely not. She tried to guilt me, claiming I was being cruel and heartless, but I didn't budge. It wasn't cruelty. It was self-preservation. I'd spent months cleaning up her mess, and I wasn't about to let her drag me down again. As I walked back into the office, I felt lighter, freer. For the first time in months, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was moving on. I threw myself into my work, and within a year, I was promoted to a senior position. Financially, things were tight, but I was slowly rebuilding my savings. I also learned to be more cautious. No more shared accounts, and every investment was scrutinized. Eventually, I started dating again, though it wasn't easy to trust someone new. I made it clear from the beginning that trust and communication were non-negotiable. Surprisingly, most women I met respected my boundaries and appreciated my honesty. It was a refreshing change from the manipulation and entitlement I'd dealt with before. The scammers, meanwhile, were sentenced to lengthy prison terms after the FBI's investigation. Knowing they couldn't hurt anyone else gave me a sense of closure. I also received a small settlement from the organization's seized assets. Not enough to recoup everything I'd lost, but it was something. As for my ex-wife, the last I heard, she was couch surfing with distant relatives. She tried to start a GoFundMe, spinning a sob story about being a victim of financial abuse, but it didn't gain much traction. People saw through her lies, and she eventually faded into obscurity. This experience taught me that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. It can come from the people closest to you. But it also taught me the importance of resilience and standing up for yourself, even when it's painful. To anyone reading this, especially those who've been burned by someone they trusted, never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. And if you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story, stick around. You never know what crazy twist life might throw at me next. Stay tuned.